Rwanda. Who hasn't heard of this small country in Central Africa, which suffered one of the worst genocides in history and a horrendous civil war, leaving 1 million people dead, millions displaced, and thousands of homes destroyed? To this day, the situation remains fragile. Clashes continue, and the wounds are slow to heal. Despite this, an entire population is trying to rebuild its life. A population made up of ordinary people who never wanted war and yet must bear its dire consequences.
All Rwanda is still on a war footing. The war is not over in people's hearts. People are still suffering greatly from the killing.
For me, the ethnic problem is something the politicians use to divide people, something they use to further their own interests.
The scars of war are everywhere, and those who escape death are paying a very high price for their lives. In Rwanda, most of the survivors are women. Women whose lives are filled with tears and sweat. Tears at the loss of their loved ones. Sweat from the hard work of putting their lives back together and rebuilding their country.
Le génocide a touché beaucoup les hommes parce que ici, la société ici, c'est une société
Rwandan society is patriarchal. It is the man who perpetuates the family. So if you want to exterminate a race, it is the men you exterminate, because it is the men who represent the race. Some women were killed too, but the proportion of women killed was much lower than men. They estimate that the Rwandan population is now 70% women. Of this 70%, they estimate that over 80% are widows or single women. I include single women because many women's husbands are in prison.
There is something in Rwanda called the phenomenon of the widows. The women have assumed responsibility for running the house and the family, against their will. Normally in Rwanda, the husband is the head of the family. That's the tradition. Because of that, many women's liberation projects did not get anywhere before the war. But since many women lost their husbands, the head of the family, the women had to take over. And they've done a good job of it.
In Rwanda, the women's role is more important than ever, since most of the physical and social reconstruction of their country depends on them. It's an immense job that must be accomplished with very limited means. A job that demands exceptional strength and determination from these women, who are still deeply traumatized by what they've lived through.
Les femmes sont seules.
The women were left on their own and facing responsibilities that they had never been prepared for. So they have to do the work they used to do before, the women's work, and now the men's work. It's up to them to rebuild the country.
You know, back in 1994, most international agencies, the people who came to help Rwanda, all left. That broke the Rwandans' hearts. That's what we saw in the media, but that's not Rwanda. Rwanda is not just massacres and everything. People are still here. They want to rebuild. They want us to see things and to report them. The people's determination is all the stronger now because the suffering was so severe. And solidarity among women goes beyond ethnic conflicts.
The pain of losing everything and the desire to rebuild have given rise to all kinds of initiatives. One of these is Duhozanye, a small association of widows in the Butare region. The small but powerful association is an example of these women's extraordinary efforts and determination to regain control of their lives. Duhozanye, in the Kinyarwanda language, means women consoling each other, a tragically appropriate name since the association consists of 350 women of all ages who lost their husbands and endured inconceivable suffering during the war. They are women of enormous courage, each with a tale to tell of the experiences that brought them together after the genocide.
Once they attacked me. They said, "You're involved too, and now we're going to kill you. If you don't show us where your children are, it's you we kill." I said I didn't know where my children were. They looked for them, but they didn't find them, so they took me away. There was a man with a spear. He held it to my back and he took me off into the bush. Just when they were going to shoot me, someone came and said, "Don't worry about her, so-and-so is getting away." But it was only a trick. So the men let me go and they ran off. The other one told me, "You'd better run too." So I ran away and hid. That's how my 4 children were able to survive the war. But their father died. These were traumatized women. They were isolated. Each one was all alone, and each one lost everything, materially and psychologically. In addition to their husbands, they're all widows. Most of them lost children, too.
bakaba barahagaritse abicanyi ni ukwicara hasi ntidukomeze kugira gutya kuko mureba twese twabaye nk'abasazi tukajya inama yatuma dushobora kugira icyo twigezaho.
All the widows gathered around Dafros, a woman who was known for her active role in the rural workers' movement. She'd been as devastated by the war as anyone, but seeing the distress of all these widows, Dafros wanted just one thing, to find some way of helping these women share their grief and help each other. And so she went to see Josepha.
She came to me and said, "Where I live, there are many widows. They're all over the place. They have lost the reason for living. I want to do something. Could Prefet help me do something?" She said, "Just help me organize them. Help me bring them together, because I'm afraid they might be thinking about suicide."
ntagira ngo wenda ubwo Marie-Claude abe yahaguruka atubwire uko bimeze n'uko byagenze n'uko amerewe muri iki gihe. Ndabona nta mutekano turagira n'umushyitsi waratwishe murabona ko ntacyo twambara twabuze abana mu kubabura barabanje barasenya umutekano ntawo uvuye he turi mu gasozi turatikira turara ntabwo kwiyeroza nta kambaro n'umurebe ibi bintu ntabwo byari bidukwiye baratuhekuye batwikira abana turaremba none ubu nta mahoro dufite genda n'abariya baduhekuye bakatwikira abana bakatwikira abana tugasigara kwambaye ubu busa batwirukana ngo nitugende ukaba ucumbitse.
Each one told the others about what had happened to her. In hearing what the others had gone through, perhaps we saw that we had it better than someone else. Seeing someone else's misfortune and comparing it to our own, Seeing that other women's suffering was even greater than ours, we cried. If you met a woman who had suffered much more than you forgot your own troubles and went to comfort her.
The war and the genocide took everything these women had, leaving them with only an immense sorrow to share. Simple things like blankets, clothing, and household utensils they received from relief agencies became an important symbol of hope.
They started to have a bit of hope. They said, there is still someone who cares what happens to us. They told me, clothes are all well and good, but we don't have anywhere to live. I told them, I don't have anything to give you. Prefed doesn't have a budget for building homes. But don't count on anyone to come from outside to help you. Try to figure out by yourselves what you can do to build houses.
With what they could find at hand, the women quickly built shacks out of branches and straw. They were tiny little shacks, but all their own, and they provided shelter from the wind and the rain. Even simple things like that are important when they're all you have.
They were very proud of that. They said, I have my own home. Some women had a little money to buy things or knew of a place where they could find their former possessions. They knew where to go to get them back. So they got together and they went to see the authorities. We know where to find our roof tiles, our doors. Please help us.
The women of Duhozanye sought to recover the possessions stolen from them during the war. This action was very important to these women, who thus dared to break the cycle of violence they'd been subjected to.
Everything is violence here. When a woman's child is taken away from her, that's serious violence. When a woman is chased away from her husband's property, that's violence. There is so much violence against women, just because they are alone and vulnerable. People think that a woman is an easy target and take advantage of her.
In Rwanda, as still is the case in many other countries, women have few rights and little power. For instance, they do not have the right to inherit or to own property. Even the children in their care officially belong to their husband's family.
The laws have to protect women. If a woman can't own her home, how can she be the family provider? So women must bring about change. Changes in society and in people's mentality, changes in the legal system and the economy.
They soon felt the need to build decent housing. But they had never built a house before. That had been men's work. Nevertheless, they decided to construct a home for each woman with their own hands.
The first homes were very badly built because we didn't know how to do it. And they were generally built low. Since women wear skirts or dresses, the children would come and peek under them when they were up on the ladders. The women felt embarrassed to climb ladders. Sometimes they built them at night while the children slept. That's how the myth itself was shattered. Before, Rwandan women couldn't get up on rooftops. Now they try. They couldn't do things before that were considered a man's prerogative.
From some of the local men, they learned masonry and carpentry. They also learned to work together and to push their own limits. But most of all, they learned to laugh again. For a woman who is now the head of the family, having a home for herself and her children is a major victory. It marks the return to family life. However, it also emphasizes the emptiness left by the loss of loved ones and her own loneliness. Now the whole weight of the family rests on her shoulders. She alone must provide for them.
The women pay a very high price for the new work they do. I find that they are doubly responsible. They used to be responsible for all the household work. Now they have the husband's work as well. And there is even community service work. So all that is a heavy responsibility for them, and one they were not prepared for.
Growing crops, raising livestock, and running a small business are the main ways the women have of feeding their families. Working the fields is a long, hard job. By tradition in Rwanda, it's a communal endeavor. In working together, the widows of Duhozanye feel less lonely and can encourage each other. This is all the more important now that they must do the plowing instead of the men. Also arranged a place to store the grain they've grown or the goods they buy together. Having a storehouse leaves them less vulnerable to bad harvests or fluctuations in prices. Widows also raise goats and pigs, thanks to the help they've received from Development and Peace, the international development agency that also provided them with support for rebuilding their homes. Some of the women have even started a small business, which allows them to make a living while making certain products available to the local people. After the events of 1994, the widows of Duhozanye have come a long way. They've managed to put their lives back together, rebuild their homes, and get the local economy going again. Duhozanye plays such an important role that 3 of its members were elected as councillors in local elections. The women have also pooled their resources to care for the orphans and educate the children.
If it hadn't been for the association, I think that many more women would be even worse off. When we saw people who were trying to do things We didn't hang back. We had to join in. So that stimulated us. That encouraged us. It was this sense of solidarity that encouraged the women to find themselves again. The association took the place of the family the women had lost. It was their pillar of strength for rebuilding their lives and their families.
In addition to helping the women meet the challenges of everyday life, the association tries to draw lessons from the events that took place in Rwanda. Its members have started recording each widow's story, hoping this will help them understand their experience of the war. Also hoping it will help them learn, so that such a tragedy will never happen again. The courageous efforts to rebuild physical and social structures in Rwanda have not yet erased the legacy of conflict. People are still divided. So what were the lessons of the war?
What is different is the experience of war, which nobody wants to go through again. Before the war, there were many people who saw war as a solution. Now no one sees war as a solution. So this experience taught us a great deal, but it was a very high price to pay. Reconciliation is a matter of will, the will to live with others in peace. And after the experience of war in Rwanda, that willingness is really there. But it is countered by strong forces in certain people who cannot bear to see Rwanda live in peace because they benefit from the war.
For the women of Rwanda, the experience of war clearly has brought about many changes. With all they have accomplished and the many new responsibilities they have assumed, their key role in society cannot be questioned.
For coming generations, there will be many changes. I think that the power relationship between men and women will change in Rwandan society. For Africa as a whole, the situation in Rwanda might serve as an example for better relations between women and men. I think that the shattering of myths has already shown that changes are possible.
I think that seeing and highlighting these examples helps us to heal and to escape from this mentality of war. As soon as you arrive in the country, the first thing you ask is, where are the massacres? Where are the problems? Instead of asking, where are things going well?
Despite the fragile situation in Rwanda, despite the newspaper headlines focusing on the poverty and tragedy, there are hundreds of associations like Duhozanye, associations of Rwandan men and women whose lives have been shattered by the war, but who are determined to rebuild their country. Ordinary people who do not see life in political or partisan terms. People who are interested in developing relationships of mutual assistance with their neighbors and doing everything in their power to ensure that their children will be able to live in peace. With their courage and determination, the widows of Duhozanye serve as an example to us all, and especially to Rwanda. Despite the ever-present turmoil, these women have dared to choose life and hope.